And we're back. Today, we're talking about the very exciting news of the Shadowdark Kickstarter for the Western Reaches. Congratulations to Kelsey Dion. She just made over $1 million in one day. This level of excitement in the hobby, I think, is something that we should be focusing on and uplifting. We should be supporting content creators who are doing magnificent numbers like this and who are making fun games that actually speak to people. Unlike the competition, in particular, Wizards of the Coast, they just released a very bland milquetoast take on Dungeons and Dragons. It's not exciting. No one's talking about it. In fact, some of the major 5e content creators are actually saying that they're not going to convert their games yet. They're going to stick with 2014 5e. And so to me, this is really funny because I feel like Wizards of the Coast has made their bed and now they're sleeping in it. People do want to play RPGs. If you are looking on YouTube or you're reading online about how our hobby is dying and no one is interested in it anymore, that's obviously not the case. People are hyped about Shadowdark. A few months ago, I made a video about how I was switching to Shadowdark, and in it, I talked about all the things that I thought was awesome with Shadowdark. And I addressed a couple things that I didn't really like. And now that I have been playing Shadowdark for several months now, my understanding, my comprehension as a dungeon master of that game it's shifted quite a bit. And so I figure we could talk about what my experience has been playing Shadowdark, and maybe that could convince you, if you haven't tried it yet, to pick it up and give it a shot. So let's talk about one of the major criticisms that Shadowdark faces whenever you're reading about it, or people who are on the outside looking in, what they think is the biggest issue with Shadowdark. And it's that Shadowdark is great for one-shots, or Esper the Bard said that it's hard for him to get attached to his character with, when it only has 1 or 2 hit points, and so he feels like that leans itself to be more of a silly game. You can't take it seriously. But let me tell you, I've been running a campaign for, I think it's been 5 months now, and we have had some death, but it hasn't been over the top. But even last session, a character, we are level 5 now, and even a very powerful fighter character who is quite resilient now, he rolled his death timer, and everybody at the table got really serious, and we were watching every roll that he made, and we were trying to get a heal to him to stabilize him, and everybody cared. There wasn't this sense that he's a throwaway character, I can roll up a new person right away. Everyone is very invested in these characters just as much as they would be if they spent 30 minutes creating their character with 5.5. We're at dozens of sessions now, and the excitement for the game, people showing up, it is not diminishing in any way. You can run a long-term game using Shadowdark, even though your characters are squishy and they can die. That is not a detriment. That is one of the strengths. It's built into the system, and it's exciting. If you're playing in a game where you know that as a bonus action, you can just be brought right back up and be 100% functional, there's almost no threat of dying. When every class can heal, you're really not that worried about losing your character. It can happen. I mean, I've lost characters in 5th edition. For example, level 1, super lethal. Everybody knows that. And at 5th level, we got disintegrated once. But aside from that, it's pretty hard to die in modern editions. So the fact that Shadowdark embraces that fear of nothing is guaranteed, you might not make it to the end of the session, it's exhilarating, and it keeps people coming back for more. And Shadowdark is flexible. We have adopted Curse of Strahd and ran multiple sessions using Curse of Strahd. I haven't made any changes to that book. The only thing that I've done is whenever it says vampire spawn, I look at the Shadowdark vampire spawn. When it says, skeletons, I look at the Shadowdark skeletons. That's the conversion. So it works very seamlessly. It's incredibly resilient no matter what system you're using. If you're a friend of the channel, you know that we have a Shadowdark solo play where we're using old school essentials, and it works, again, just fine. we've had more death on my solo play than we have at my home table, but that's probably because there's multiple minds at the home table where like they can solve problems better than like as a team than I can by myself. And one of the most fun things we did with Shadowdark is we ran a PvP event, a Bronstein. A lot of people would say that, Shadowdark it's just for one shots or whatever, but we ran a massive full table player versus player event where we took the Shucked Oyster from Black Lodge Games, and the players were using it for carousing. They burned down the Shucked Oyster, and so Madame Vice, she put out a call to action. She said, whoever can find out who burned down my brothel, I will give you a legendary magic item from the Shadowdark core rulebook. So the players, they went through the monster portion, they selected a stat block, and they built a faction around their stat block. And each of the factions got about 40 to 45 hit points that they would divide equally amongst members of their faction. So if they chose orcs, they could have like 15, I think it was like 11 or 15 orcs. One of them chose a druid, so he got one druid. And they went around the city trying to find each other and unlock secrets. They were manipulating each other. Like, if you work with me to take out the witches, so we can finally catch the guy who burned down the brothel, and then we'll battle it out at the end to see who gets the legendary. So, I mean, again, that just speaks to the flexibility of what Shadowdark can do, and I think that's why people keep coming back to it. There are only 4 classes in the core rulebook, but I know that in the Western Reaches, they will be expanding that. But let's talk a little bit about the classes. The fighter is strong. It is the class where you actually feel your power progression. When you swing your d20, you actually feel like, okay, I'm cleaving things. I feel like the fighter. The thief shines outside of combat in our experience. When our thief is rolling its skills, every thief skill in Shadowdark is rolled with advantage, and so you feel like a superstar. You're unlocking doors, you're scaling walls, you're spying on people and listening in on conversations. You have fast hands all the time. Our thief player wasn't feeling the combat so much. They would get some backstabs in, but being a D4 hit die class, I think they've felt that a little bit, and we did see the thief's strengths, and it was outside of combat. We liked the priest class. In fact, the priest was one of the classes that died, and the player rolled up another priest right away because they enjoyed it so much. And actually, the second time around, the stats were a little better. But what's cool about the priest in Shadowdark is that it's not limited to a certain kind of weapon. You can be pretty aggressive with the swords, and that feels strong. There's a lot of spell options, and so you can be that Buffy, not Buffy the Vampire Slayer. You can be that buff type class, the support class, or you can be the melee damage dealer, and there are going to be spells you can select that's going to support your choice. And don't get me started on the wizard class. My wife plays a wizard, and she has Wish at level 5. What's cool about wizards is they can learn any spell scroll they find. And I know what you're thinking. Well, you're a bad DM, Mike, for giving her the Wish scroll. But she rolled a natural 20 on the learn check, and to be fair, she hasn't abused it. She understands that, like, she came to the table, she's like, look, I don't want to just use this every time we get into a pickle. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I cannot wait for a failed spell check. There are things about Shadowdark that are a little bit flexible if you don't like the core rules. There's different play modes. And if you have been watching the solo plays, you know that we use Hunter mode and Chaos mode. Hunter mode is going to increase the speed that your characters level up because you get XP for killing monsters. And Chaos mode has us re-rolling our initiative every turn to keep things spicy. It's cool because, you can go second in one round and then go first in the next round. And so it's almost like you had 2 turns back to back. And when that happens, you can kind of clear the board of enemies. I did address before how I didn't really like the distance mechanics in Shadowdark, and that has become a non-factor. We have switched to Theater of the Mind. We all sit at the table. We have a little universal dungeon terrain set up, and we don't even use it. But they put their minis there, and sometimes they'll move them around and use them as a frame of reference. But we're completely theater of the mind now, and that has worked really well for us. You know, Shadowdark rewards very creative play, and so we're not restricting ourselves with, grid counting anymore. And the core rulebook of Shadowdark has an amazing DM tool section. There are random tables for everything. I use the weapon name generator, the dungeon name generator, the town generator for all of my games now. There are random encounter tables for any district in a city, in a town, any terrain that you can think of. Shadowdark has you covered. With a D100 table too. You can generate a unique trap in a matter of seconds. In fact, let's do that right now. All right, here we go. All right, we have a crossbow trap that's triggered with a pressure plate that does 3d10 petrifying damage. Okay, so 3d10 petrifying damage. Okay, so it does 3d10 damage and you have to save versus con or you're petrified. That is some sick basilisk poison on that crossbow bolt. I guess the point of this video is more of like a celebration of Shadowdark and the absolute W of the Kickstarter that happened yesterday, as of the time of this recording. So again, congratulations to Kelsey Dion. Shadowdark is super fun. I can't wait to get my hands on these new books. As long as Wizards of the Coast keeps fumbling and taking L after L and making really weird choices with their playable races and their monsters, people will continue to abandon that game and move to creators who actually care. So, pick up Shadowdark, give it a shot. If you like it, let me know in the comment section if you play Shadowdark. We have hit a massive milestone on the channel. We hit 2,000 subscribers today. So I want to say thank you to everybody in our community. You guys are amazing. I'm so proud to be a part of this group. You guys are great. If you liked it, please hit like. If you want to subscribe, do that too. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye. In the end, my wife, who was running the Bene Gesserit, the Witch faction, she won the Bronstein. Everybody seems to trust her until the very end and before it's too late. She's won 2 Bronsteins, in-person Bronsteins, 2 PvP events, and I think the other players at the table are no longer going to let that happen.